I've just loaded the student version of Solidworks 2019. The setup process, there may be a few residual since I uninstalled 2018 and moved over to 2019 here. That take these as recommendations, suggestions, not a requirement. That if you like having some of these items on your screen or have things that you're used to working with, stay with them. But would like to make you aware of some options that can be a little ease of use type deal. So when it first comes up, I don't particularly care for the splash screen, so I'm a do not show on startup. We can get back to that relatively easy. When I click out of it, it's going to go away, but this little home will bring it back up, and then it's not checked. So to get that back, I would have to go into the options, dig around a little bit. I'm sure I can find where we tell that to turn on and get it set up. All right. So with a fresh install, the task pane shows up, but as soon as you click out, it's going to collapse that sidebar task pane. All right. So some of the things that we can do is we will check the add-ins. So with the student version, we have quite a few of the premium add-ons available. Those are currently not checked. So if anything like the simulation or the toolbox, really, if I don't, if I'm not using the toolbox or those items, I will probably leave those off. Let's see, it doesn't look like I installed or I either unchecked a few items when I did the install. Things like the forum, they're kind of nice to see, but basically this tab over here, I just don't use it enough. And then things like the CAM packages, additional items, pretty much I'm going to uncheck everything unless I just know I'm going to be using it. All right, that's going to save a little bit on the launch time if you have a computer that's a little bit older. This is my 2000, call it end of 2012, early 2013 i7 with 8 GB of RAM and onboard video. So it does have a GeForce, but I did not pay attention when I launched if it was activating the secondary video card or the onboard card. So we'll take a look at how to do that at some point here. One of the things with Windows, before we get too much further into the SolidWorks setup, is I haven't succeeded completely, but we've been working towards having the My Documents show up, and I don't think there's any major personal information that you can glean from this, but basically we'll take the My Documents folder, and when you right click on your documents, you can set the location to be on on the cloud drive. So disadvantage if you're paranoid about cloud drives is it's on the cloud drive. Advantage is that if something happens to the computer, all of the data information will be stored in that off-site location, and you will have kind of that instantaneous or at least residual backup. So one of the things that also occurs is with the desktop, we found out from our IT that we can also point the desktop. So a lot of people like to save and populate their complete desktop screen with everything under the sun, so that can also be backed up. I don't personally like to work from the desktop folder. I think there's places where it can get confused between users, defaults, some other things. My Documents is always, well, okay, almost always my Documents. What I would like to get to a point is where I have one My Documents on all my computers, my desktop, my laptop, the education computer all points to this OneDrive, and the My Documents is a common folder across all three of those systems. So that, like I said, I haven't quite got there yet, and it's still a little proving out the mix. So that being the case, looking down through here, I have a Solidworks 2019 system. In preparation, I'll probably just go ahead and create a new folder, and this is going to be my SolidWorks system, and I'll go ahead and throw a 19 on the end of it because I may be doing it on this system next year with 2020, and apparently I still can't spell SolidWorks. So quick click, and we'll make that correction. All right, so as I create items or I identify items, I want to put them into that mix. So what this does is either in the My Documents or in the cloud drive, depending on permissions, certain corporate commercial entities will limit your permissions, and SolidWorks thinks that you're the admin power user of all of the system, and you have access to things like the view, and we're going to see file name extensions and hidden items. So when I go to some place like the C drive, let's go ahead and expand out the C drive here, I should be able to see things like where is it? The program data. There are items embedded. If your corporate or education system does not give you permission, that's kind of a pain not be able to get into. Being able to write and change items from the program files, and so those different locations will have an effect. So I will give a quick list of those, and then you kind of be able to track as you need them where some of these items are going to get set up. So as we create new files or I find things that are embedded in these folders, I will either retrieve them and put them into my system folder, or I will create them new and then go into the options and point them to a new location. Alright, so go ahead and reduce that. So going into the options, when we click on the little down arrow, we're going to get that expanded list. First item is the options, the add-ins, restore, save, restore settings, which will, after we make all these changes, it would be a good time to create a backup. The button size then, depending on your screen, small, medium, or large. If we go to large, let's see what that does. It's thinking about it. Alright, so may not resize, but yeah, that got pretty big, and now I'm going to have to go look for it. So let's see if it will let me back in there without losing its mind. Alright, so all of those, so clicking the right click, or doing a right click in the gray area, and made it over to the file properties, but not to the rest. Alright, so let's see, that's my screen. I'm going to expand this out just a little bit, and needed one more closer. Alright, so let's try that again. We'll go to medium. You know, again, that's going to be helpful, but I am on a slightly larger screen taking a snapshot of the window, so we'll have to see what that looks like on the video to which one size, but since it is a limited amount of screen space for the 720 version, and I would like to compare because a couple of the sheet metal videos that I just completed were on a 1920 by 1080, where this is going to be the by 720. So anyway, enough about screen resolutions. You can modify and customize as needed. So once we get into the options, I'll let this launch. And maximum recent documents. And let's see, input. So that one's relatively new. I don't recognize that one for 2019. Include documents opened from other documents. So I don't know if that would be links or from the assembly, because I've noticed lately that when I was opening assemblies, they didn't automatically show up. So I'm going to go ahead and click that one and try it out. Input dimension value, yes, when we set a dimension and place its location, then it's going to ask. Otherwise, it will just be whatever it is, and we'd have to go back and double click or update it on the fly. Single command per pick, no, that's kind of a pain to draw a line and then have to click line again, draw another line, draw a circle, click, draw another circle. Let's say face highlighting, thumbnail graphics in Windows Explorer. We used to look at that one as if you had a graphics card that was struggling and a lot of files having the thumbnails come up in the Windows Explorer folders was kind of a lot. So if it's struggling, that would be one to turn off. System separator for the dot. Confirmation corner is the little check and X. Auto show property manager, so it's going to come up as it's needed and change to what's there. Sometimes I don't like it when it auto sizes, so that's my personal preference. Debuggers, edit macros, we're not really doing that. We'll go ahead and let it do feature expert. Freeze bar is one that we'll take a look later. And then technical, check solutions, all of those. And then, do you want to participate in the product improvement? Okay, model-based definition, editing of templates for 3D PDFs, that's new. Don't know exactly what that does. Drawings, mark all parts, assembly dimensions for import into drawings by default. That's usually the first one that I key in on. This one's unchecked, so I believe that probably came over from the previous settings, but you have to check that one. My logic is that if I want it marked for the drawing, why would I mark all of them for the drawing? And then I have to anyway, that logic still kind of baffles me. So things that I think are critical, I want to be able to mark, and then that is the difference in a lot of my videos of the purple dimensions versus the black dimensions. So the kind of purple are not marked for the drawing and the black are marked for drawing. Automatically scale, and just kind of reading down through here real quick. And really a lot of these don't need to be changed, but the first couple we'll just take a quick display areas, performance. And when you're above 2,000 items, which can happen if you bring in a really complex, maybe a scan or a something that was converted like a raster to vector image. The colors, I would still say be very careful with going through and changing these. If there are items that you can't see or do not see well, then experimentally change one at a time. If you go through and make a lot of drastic changes, there's going to be some things that are going to end up in conflict. We do want to use the scene backgrounds, which is also the little box that shows up on the heads-up display, and we will set some of those through the appearances on the task pane. But we have a default appearance to the color, and a default scene is now the white kitchen. Not my favorite. I will still always go back to the white background. We can always just default it to the plain, but it is nice to be able to move back and forth between these default scenes if you need to do something with the group. Specified colors, shaded with edges, editing parts in the assembly. Sketch items, auto rotate view normal to sketch plane on sketch creation. That one's pretty handy. Sometimes I will turn it off if I find that it's auto-rotating all of the time and I really wanted to keep that last view. The other one, fully defined sketches. We are not always able to work with fully defined sketches. Our goal is to get to a fully defined sketch, but if that's not possible, I still want to be able to close the sketch, do something I need to do, and come back to it. So I would say try that one experimentally, but for the most part it's going to stay off. One of the let's see, arcs, yeah, display entity points, prompt to close sketch. That is when we do the confirmation corner. If I hit the X, it will say, "Are you sure?" And if that's turned off, it just closes the sketch. So that's kind of an advanced. You get familiar with the software, then you might want to do that one. Create sketch on new part. Downside there is it's not going to ask you which face, plane, or where you want to create that sketch on the new part. It's going to go automatically into the front plane, which I don't always want to be automatically in the front plane. Override dimensions on drag move. No. I set those dimensions, and if I drag things around, I want the objects to change location, not necessarily change dimensions. Display plane when shaded. Line length measurement between virtual sharps and 3D. Spline tangency, a couple of these are advanced. Ghost image on drag. Curvature comb bounding curve. That one's still advanced. Scale sketch on first dimension creation. And on-screen numeric input on entity creation. So I think those are some of the buttons that show up in the right mouse context menu when we're applying dimensions. And then prompt and set driven by default. So a lot of times I just do those as needed. We're going to allow for the snapping, automatic relations, make sure that that one stays checked. There is another location where that can get turned off, but if you find that you're going through the sketch and you're not getting any inferred relations, this is one of the places where we'd want to check that, yes, they can be a little much at times, but we do want the software to help us out creating those relations. Display, nothing really too much in there. We can experiment a little bit with those. Box and lasso, depending on what you're used to. Selection in wireframe. Selection through transparency. That one you have to experiment. Sometimes it can be a challenge with transparent parts. There's also, I believe, the shift select, which selects the transparent part rather than through the part. Small face, enhanced selection on high resolution. Again, experiment, performance. One thing to be aware of if you are having issues with rotations and moves, that you can if this is not available at all, then there is no OpenGL there. If you check it, it used to be that it was kind of a one-way trip, hardware or software. So I'll point that out as one of the, let's keep that as a possible option. And reading the enhanced graphics performance beta functionality not intended for production use. Well, that's a little ominous. Anyway, the software OpenGL can check or unchecked, or if it's just grayed out, it's not available. It depends on what your video card is able to support, but it will correct some rotation issues, some graphics problems. Don't really see anything in assemblies. We're not quite there yet. Default templates. We're going to stay with the standard defaults, but I may update it at some point. And then we get to the important one, the file locations. So the list will probably refer to, we have the templates, the default corporation, Solidworks Corporation program files. Things like the design library, if I wanted to put that where it was common to all of the computers, my work computer, my desktop, my laptop. Things like the weldment profiles we'll get into. The other one that I'm looking for is the sheet formats. So when we go to set those up, we will go through and identify probably half a dozen in here, and we'll refer back to that list to make sure they all get caught up. Interacting with the feature manager. I don't really need to see the design binder right now. It depends on if you use that. If you want to collect information in a Word document embedded into the Solidworks file, that can be handy. Blocks are automatic, so if we create a block, it will show up in the feature tree over here. I like the solid bodies, so some of my settings came over this way because we are showing the solid bodies. That is not typically on by default. Let's see what else is the handful. Sensors is set to show. If we create a sensor, well, I'll try it at automatic and see what it does. Mate references, default planes, pretty much everything in there looks good. And so automatic is if it is utilizing it, it will show up. Surface bodies really needs to go to automatic. And if it's hidden, it's going to be hidden pretty much continuously, even if it would end up in use. But I do like the solid bodies. I think it's handy to be able to identify, hey, all of a sudden you have a solid body. Why did that happen? Increments for the rotation, views, the all-important reverse, the mouse wheel direction, backup and recovery information. I think I've mentioned, if you watched any of the other videos, that backup and recovery can present certain problems if you are dealing with sensitive data. So you want to make sure that you know that is buried very deep in the user app data. But if it backs up enough of your documents, then you can have whole second data sets sitting on your hard drive, either unprotected or possibly unaware of. So typically, even if I am using a backup folder, if I'm having problems with the software crashing and I want to make sure that I have those backups, I'm still going to probably point it over to that SolidWorks system folder and create a backup in there. Auto recovery information every so many minutes. And then the reminder in the bottom, I think that's about as good as anything. After 20 minutes, hey, you probably ought to save this. Automatically dismiss after 5 seconds or some value. Touch mode if you are using a laptop or all-in-one with touch screen. And then the whole wizard and toolbox. And not quite jumping to that one, so yeah, maybe crashed it. Nope, there it goes. So location, and this would be another place where if I did put that data, and this is a fairly substantial large, so at some point we also have to be aware of how much cloud storage we actually have on those drives. But I could possibly put the whole wizard and toolbox, so if I was creating a lot of custom thread forms or custom geometry, and I wanted to make sure that everybody in our group or in our design team had access to the same information, I would put that out on the Dropbox or the OneDrive or whatever we're using and point everybody's systems to it here. File Explorer, what do we want to see in the File Explorer view, which is over on the task pane. Search modes, index only when the computer is idle. Collaboration, messages, so anything going on there, errors, import items, and at least initially from the last couple times that we ran into it, I'm going to turn off the 3D interconnect. If I bring something in as an imported solid, then it can remain a without the link to the original, at least temporarily, and then exporting to various items. So that gets us a real quick overview of the options. Next video we will start setting up more of our details and getting into that layout.